Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The Egyptian security delegation, led by General Mustafa al-Bahiri, the deputy chief of the Egyptian intelligence agency, met with the leaders of the Palestinian factions. They met with the Islamic Jihad delegation to discuss ways to create dialogue, unite the Palestinian front, and end the tension between Hamas and Fatah. Palestinian factions requested the presence of the security delegation in order to dissolve the tension among the factions and create joint dialogue, which is in the interest of the Palestinian people. In order to end the crisis and overcome the tension on the Palestinian streets, leaders of the Fatah movement met with the Egyptian security delegation led by General Mustafa al-Bahiri. The delegation arrived to Gaza to launch an internal Palestinian dialogue and reinforce the unity of the Palestinian front. Their decision is based on an appeal presented by the Fatah movement.
This massive demonstration is to protest the court's decision and to emphasize that the movement was victorious. We respect collaboration based on political diversity and in accordance with the democratic process we hope to establish in the Palestinian arena.
The Fatah movement met with the Egyptian delegation and emphasized the need to resolve the conflict and create dialogue, reiterating the need to respect the Palestinian judicial system and its decisions.
The recent developments were discussed. We explained our position on all issues, reiterating the importance and the need to implement democracy in Palestine. We respect the results, support the court's authority, respect its decision, and emphasize unity.
During its meeting with the Egyptian delegation, the Islamic Jihad movement proposed creating a national council agreed upon by everyone to monitor future elections and welcomed mediation to prevent any clashes between Fatah and Hamas.
We are open to mediation between our brothers in Fatah and our brothers in Hamas in order to overcome this crisis, because no one on the Palestinian front will benefit from tension between the two biggest factions. We are prepared for joint mediation with our Egyptian brothers to overcome the current tension.
The Egyptian delegation also met with the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine in the Gaza Strip. They presented their solution to the current crisis. According to analysts, Egyptian efforts to solve the crisis in the Gaza Strip will be fruitful, especially since all factions are seeking a dialogue to solve the problem and end this brief conflict between Hamas and Fatah. In separate incidents today, 4 American soldiers were killed in the center of Baghdad and 36 people were killed by 2 explosions in the suburbs of the capital. The Iraqi government repeated its condemnation of yesterday's random aggressions and confirmed that these violent operations are not linked to the presence of foreigners, but to the intention to kill civilians. There are signs of a common understanding having been reached between the Association of Muslim Scholars and the Badr Association, loyal to the Supreme Council of the Islamic Revolution, which is headed by Abdul Aziz al-Hakim, who met with the delegation of the association along with Iraqi Minister of Interior Bayan Bakr Solar. They met in order to end the differences and divisions based on the association's accusations that the Badr forces are carrying out arrest and elimination campaigns that target Sunni imams and worshippers at mosques in Baghdad and other provinces.
I condemn such division, religious division, sectarian division, or any other type of national divisions. We will not allow Zarqawi's scheme to succeed in Iraq. As you noticed, throughout all the acts of killings and explosions, the Iraqi people remain strong, united and resilient. I call on Sunni and Shiite clerics, the Kurds and the Arabs, and all the Iraqi sects to bury this division.
Meanwhile, Layth al-Kubba, the official Iraqi government spokesman, spoke about armed attacks and the current escalation in the capital of Baghdad and some of its suburbs.
This is not an Iraqi phenomenon, and it does not have anything to do with the political violence or Iraqi politics. These are fronts that seek to make Iraq a theater for their reckless and random acts, and to make Iraq a place of chaos for their soldiers to train. They are coming from other surrounding countries.
In the continued series of armed attacks against the security, Iraqi and American forces, an American source reported that 4 American soldiers were killed by an explosive device in Baghdad. Another source raised the number of American soldiers to 8 when U.S. forces were attacked by a booby-trapped car. Earlier, a car bomb targeted an Iraqi police patrol near a girls' school in the Karadi neighborhood in Baghdad, killing 6 people and injuring at least 3 other civilians and police, as well as the burning of a number of civilian cars. From Baghdad, Ala Ja'far, Saudi Arabian Television.
His Majesty the King has held talks with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, who stopped over in Amman en route to Washington for talks with President George W. Bush and other administration officials. The King told Abbas the success of his White House talks was key to breaking the deadlock in the Palestinian-Israeli peace process and kickstarting negotiations. He said implementation of the roadmap peace plan in its entirety was a pressing need, stressing that an Israeli pullout from the Gaza Strip due to take place this summer should be the start to a West Bank withdrawal leading to an independent Palestinian state. His Majesty pledged Jordan would continue its support of Palestinians and help the Palestinian Authority in building security and civil institutions. Before leaving the West Bank for the United States, the Palestinian president said he wants his first White House visit to yield assurances from President George W. Bush of pressure on Israel to start heeding the roadmap peace plan. He spoke after top Palestinian and Israeli security officials held talks in Tel Aviv to coordinate a Gaza pullout and discuss handover of West Bank cities to Palestinian security control. Samer Jamil has the story.
Leaving Ramallah for the White House talks, the Palestinian president said he would demand that the Americans be positive on economic and political issues, namely the roadmap. Abbas has scaled back expectations of concrete promises from Bush of final status negotiations on a Palestinian state once Israel evacuates the occupied Gaza Strip in 3 months. Israel rejects such talks until Abbas subdues Palestinian factions, a precondition for carrying out the roadmap. Thursday's meeting has great symbolic importance as the first by Palestinian president since 2000, when Middle East peace negotiations collapsed into violence, for which U.S. officials often blamed Abbas's late predecessor, Yasser Arafat. Washington, keen to embark on the long-stalled roadmap, has welcomed the ceasefire Abbas declared with the Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon in February and persuaded militant factions to respect. Abbas is expected to impress on Bush the threat he believes he will face from Islamic factions, especially the growing Hamas movement, if Palestinian hopes for a viable state through negotiations are dashed after a Gaza pullout. In an encouraging sign, Israeli and Palestinian officials took steps to coordinate the Gaza pullout. An agreement reached by Israeli Defense Minister Shaul Mofaz and Palestinian Interior Minister Nasser Youssef seems the first concrete step made by both sides to coordinate Israel's planned disengagement from the occupied territory in August. In talks held in Tel Aviv, Mofaz and Youssef agreed the Palestinians will present a detailed plan of how Palestinian security forces would be used during the disengagement from Gaza. Moffat said both sides should be interested in coordinating the Israeli pullout, but added the withdrawal will be carried out in any event with or without Palestinian involvement to maintain calm.
Israel wants to coordinate the disengagement with the Palestinians. It's in our interest that disengagement happens successfully, and the best way for that to happen is for the Israelis and the Palestinians to act in together to make this happen in a way that will serve both our interests. Ultimately, we're pulling out of Gaza, and we're hopeful that the Palestinians will have an orderly transfer and that we will see the creation of successful Palestinian institutions after we pull out.
But Palestinians played down the outcome, saying the negotiators made limited progress because Israel has delayed a further handover of West Bank cities and failed to deliver on a pledge to free more prisoners from its jails.
Of course, I mean, we have to coordinate to guarantee the day after. We are not party to the decisions about withdrawal at all. The Israelis don't involve us. It's unilateral. But we are coordinating what's necessary so that the day after we are in charge.
Extremist Jews are escalating a protest campaign against the Gaza pullout, as opinion poll support for the plan has slipped a little in reaction to fresh rocket barrages on Gaza settlements. Samir Jamil, Jordan Television.
In the United States, visiting Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon promised to cooperate with President Mahmoud Abbas, Palestine's newly elected leader. But he warned he would only do so as long as Israel did not risk its security. Sharon was addressing a pro-Israel lobby group in Washington, D.C., the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Sharon told supporters he had paid a heavy political price for supporting peace with the Palestinians. At least 3 U.S. soldiers and 2 Iraqis have been killed by insurgents in Iraq in a car bomb attacks in central Baghdad, a day after a wave of suicide attacks and bomb blasts that killed at least 56 Iraqis. The U.S. 3rd Infantry Division said that 3 soldiers were killed when a car bomb exploded next to their patrol. Since last Sunday, at least 11 U.S. troops have been killed in action in Iraq. Earlier, a car bomb was detonated beside an Iraqi police convoy, killing at least 2 people and wounding 8. Meanwhile, Al-Qaeda's group in Iraq said its leader, Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi, has been wounded, according to a web posting. In Baghdad, U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Steve Boylan, spokesman for U.S. forces in Iraq, said they had no information on whether Zarqawi was wounded or on the state of his health. Boylan said that Zarqawi was still the main target to be captured for killed, and he would continue to be hunted until that happened. He also said that such reports had been heard frequently before and were almost impossible to verify, adding that it could be another ploy. The Pentagon in Washington said it had no basis to confirm or deny the story. Lebanon's top Christian and Muslim opposition leaders will battle it out in parliamentary polls after failing to forge an electoral alliance. Extensive last-minute contacts between Maronite Christian opposition leader Michel Aoun and aides of Druze leader Walid Jumblat and Sunni leader Saad al-Hariri failed to produce a joint state for the key Ba'ad al-Ali constituency in Mount Lebanon, a mixed direct in the center of the country. Aoun told a news conference that no agreement was reached. The electoral confrontation shatters the unity of the anti-Syria opposition. Nevertheless, the election will not be fought down simple sectarian lines. The 3 leaders and other factions will field mixed Muslim-Christian lists that are needed to succeed in Lebanon's complicated power-sharing system. The head of the UN delegation monitoring the elections says the UN wants to ensure there is no violation of international principles and current Lebanese legislation.
What we are here to do is a lot more modest, which is basically to see, according to the electoral framework currently in existence in Lebanon, whether, first of all, these elections have been as transparent as possible, whether they follow the law, whether no procedures have been violated, whether due process is provided to people who complain about the violations. And we expect basically that the people will participate in this process, because it's also a way of having their voice heard.
The representatives of the world's Greek Orthodox churches have met in Istanbul to discuss scandal-hit Jerusalem Patriarch Irenaeus I. Istanbul-based ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew led the meeting to decide Irenaeus' fate after the highest decision-making body of the Greek Orthodox Church in Jerusalem fired him earlier this month over his reported involvement in the sale of church land to Jewish investors. Irenaeus has denied the allegations and refuses to leave his post. The Jerusalem Church has said it no longer recognizes Irenaeus as its patriarch in the wake of newspaper reports that said he helped lease church and land to Jews. The news had angered Palestinians who see such deals as attempts by Israel to gain control of occupied Jerusalem.
Ambassador to Washington, Danny Ayalon, visited convicted Israeli spy Jonathan Pollard in his North Carolina prison cell last night. This was the first visit by an Israeli ambassador with Pollard, who was sentenced to life in prison after being convicted of passing classified information to Israel in March 1987. However, the meeting was a difficult one, and Pollard said, quote, "I was severely disappointed and even disgusted. After 20 years, Pollard said, I had hoped for a serious meeting, but instead all I received was an empty gesture and a meeting without substance." Pollard also told the ambassador to relay to Prime Minister Ariel Sharon that he would not participate in any more of Sharon's, quote, cheap tricks. Ambassador Ayalon admitted after the meeting that it had been a difficult one. "I came to him," said Ayalon, "with a message of strength and support from the Israeli government and people, but after 20 years in prison, Pollard certainly has tough feelings regarding the Israeli government." Joining me now to discuss this case, I'm joined in the studio by Pollard's lawyer, Larry Dubb. Mr. Dubb, thanks for joining us this evening.
Pleasure.
You spoke with Pollard's wife, Esther, after the meeting with Ambassador Ayalon. Why was your client so infuriating by his meeting with Ayalon?
Well, it was the first serious meeting initiated by the Israeli government, and after 20 years, one had expected that the ambassador would come with some type of concrete proposal. Instead of empty gestures, they did come. We had anticipated that something serious would have occurred at the meeting, but in fact, nothing but quote-unquote empty gestures were done.
But in fact, this was the first visit after 20 years. Isn't that in itself a significant move? Couldn't that lead to something?
Well, you know, if you're talking about someone sitting in jail for 30 days or so, maybe. Jonathan Pollard is 20 years in prison. He's in tough condition. His health is deteriorating. He's aged quite a bit in prison. He's now 51 years old. We don't have that much time, and time is of the essence. And we want to bring that message to the Israeli government that they have to act, and they have to act now.
There have been rumors that President Bush will pardon Pollard as a goodwill gesture following the withdrawal from Gaza. What do you make of these rumors?
Well, we've heard these rumors as well as everyone. We've also heard that Pollard is involved in a three-way swap, which started with Azam and will involve Marwan Barghouti later on as a gesture to the Palestinians. It's really very disappointing that every time the Israeli people are asked to sacrifice, Mr. Pollard is always used as a fig leaf to justify the national anguish and the suffering of the Jewish people.
You're now appealing to the Supreme Court to have Pollard recognized as a prisoner of Zion. What's the basis of your case?
Well, we believe that Mr. Pollard, this Bagatz, which is a petition to the High Court of Appeal, represents the culmination of three other petitions. The first being the citizenship, second being the agent status, and now we want to close the circle and bring to the attention that he's a prisoner of Zion. This will allow Mr. Pollard benefits in prison and make it very difficult for the Americans who supported the release of Jewish prisoners of Zion from the Soviet Union to suddenly say we have our own prisoner of Zion in prison.
You spoke just before about the difficult conditions that Pollard's in. Why hasn't his American lawyer appealed to the American prison system about his conditions?
The problem with the American prison system is Americans treat their prisoners very harshly. We don't like to make a lot of noise in the prison system because the only one who suffers is Jonathan Pollard. He works 10 hours a day. He cleans toilets, washes windows. He does a lot of menial work just to get basic privileges. We're afraid that if we raise the ante in the prison system, Mr. Pollard will pay the price.
He's been in prison now, Jonathan Pollard, for 20 years. Has he given up hope of ever being free?
Well, the amazing thing about Mr. Pollard is everyone who goes to visit him comes away amazed at the determination, self-determination, and the brilliance of this man. And that's why it hurts me every day that he's in prison, because he could be such a valuable asset to this country.
In the hope that Pollard's released from prison, could you see him coming to Israel, or is he so fed up with the Israeli government and the lack of assistance that he would never come here?
Well, Mr. Pollard's attitude toward the Israeli government is one thing, but his love of the Jewish people here in Israel is something else. He loves the people. He loves the young kids who go out in the street for him. Mr. Pollard only has one choice in his mind, and that's to come to Israel and live with his people.
Larry Dubb, Pollard's lawyer, thanks so much for coming in this evening and speaking with us.
My pleasure.
Prime Minister Ahmed Nadif continues his U.S. visit with more talks and meetings with U.S. officials. As part of our coverage of Nadif's visit to the U.S., Nile TV's Nihal Saad spoke to Ambassador Mark Ginsburg, member of the Council on Foreign Relations.
Ambassador Mark Charles Ginsburg, member of the Council on Foreign Relations, thank you very much for talking to us. Let me start by a question on what you heard from Prime Minister Nadif now. He's been telling us about the kind of political reforms, the economic reforms, and the social contract with the people in Egypt. What are your thoughts here?
I've known Egypt for many years. I used to live in Egypt. I've seen a lot of prime ministers come to Washington. He's got to be one of the most telegenic, authoritative persons who actually can reach out and speak directly to the American people. I was very impressed with him. And most importantly, I understand the very delicate tightrope that he is walking, trying to encourage Americans to understand that the process of democratization is underway. It may not necessarily be at the speed that the Washington Post and others may want, but this is a process, nevertheless, that's beginning. And as someone who understands the Arab world well, the American people have got to understand this has got to be a process that is an Arab process, not an American process.
So do I gather from what you're saying that perhaps American interference in the domestic affairs of some Arab governments might backlash?
Well, yes.
At the popular level?
Of course, and after all, the image of the United States in the Arab world is not the best these days, but at the same time, I think it's important for Arabs to understand that the American government, the American people, are truly interested in promoting the rule of law and reform. It may not necessarily be the brand of American democracy, and frankly, why would Arabs want to have a brand of American democracy? We ourselves haven't quite figured it out.
So, Ambassador Ginsburg, thank you very much for talking to us.
You're welcome.
In Morocco, the families of Islamist prisoners decided to join the hunger strike in solidarity with more than 1,000 Islamist detainees. They went on the hunger strike to pressure the government to either release them or retry them because they considered their past trials unfair. These mothers and their children are crowded in this small area at the headquarters of the Nasser organization to express their support to Islamist detainees. The prisoners, who belong to what is known as the Jihadi Salafist movement, decided to go on an open-ended hunger strike in various Moroccan prisons. Their motto is freedom or death.
We decided to join the hunger strike until we die. My son has been sentenced to life. Others were sentenced to 30 years in prison and even death. I can't take this anymore. I'm 55 years old. All these women that you see have the same problem.
The Moroccan authorities do not have the power to force the prisoners' relatives to end their hunger strike, but they are trying hard to force them to end the strike, which the prisoners started at the beginning of May.
Violations still continue inside prisons in order to stop the hunger strike. This strike has given a big push to pressure the government to respect the fair demands of the detainees.
The government has been using the carrot and stick policy. It uses an iron fist. Sheikh Hafizazi said that they consider themselves prisoners because they can't freely express their opinions, since they condemned what America is doing to vulnerable nations. Because they condemned the American arrogance and oppression, they were put in prisons and forced to leave their women and children without any support.
We demand that they be released. They must be freed so they can go back to their children. Our children have been left on the streets. Young girls have been made orphans. Some of the women are now too old. They say that if they die, there wouldn't be anyone to bury them.
Political leaders and courts are divided about the demands to release or retry the detainees. Some even attacked the hunger strike of the Islamist detainees, saying that it is an attempt to twist the arm of the government and make it more receptive to Islamic movements. The hunger strike of the Moroccan prisoners has put the government in an awkward position. The fact that the families of the prisoners have joined in the hunger strike makes it even worse for the government. In order to find a solution to this problem, the government has to deal with the situation in a conciliatory and fair manner rather than strengthen security measures.
The Royal Human Development Initiative was the topic of discussion at the World Bank, which praised efforts exerted toward development by Morocco. During a meeting in Washington, the World Bank approved a strategy to coordinate its efforts with the Development Initiative because it will speed up economic development. We will leave you with a report of Yusuf Al-Hamidi. The Initiative for Human Development is a long-term social project. This is how the World Bank described the initiative that was announced by His Highness the King the night before yesterday. The World Bank Administrative Committee announced that it has approved a new strategy to cooperate with Morocco during the next 4 years. This strategy aims at speeding up economic development, creating jobs, and maximizing the level of basic services for the poor, in addition to increasing educational projects. The World Bank confirmed that its strategy takes the Royal Development Initiative into consideration and explained that it is completely willing to support Morocco with all means necessary so it can overcome development obstacles. Many political observers believe that the Royal Human Development Initiative aims at achieving human development and takes the dignity of every Moroccan into consideration to strengthen his role in society. Also, it stems from sincere political will, ambition, and courage. This initiative is the ideal solution to the problem. It calls for the comprehensive participation of all segments of the Moroccan population, which stems from a modern social vision of Morocco that complies with law and justice. Truly, this initiative is an ideal model for a democratic society, and it is very different from temporary solutions that were used for decades.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.